Hello! Welcome once again to the Rotten Horror Picture Show, the horror movie podcast, where we talk about films off the Rotten Tomatoes 200 Best Horror Movies of All Time list. My name is Clay. With me, as always, is Amanda. Amanda, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm glad we have a new captain for this death ship.
Yes. Always crucial, because they keep dying. I have a question for you.
Sure.
This film we're covering today.
Yes.
Nosferatu.
Mm-hmm.
Does this word not sound like the death bird calling your name at midnight? Beware you never say it. Ah, fuck. For then the pictures of life will fade to shadows. Haunting dreams will climb forth from your heart and feed on your blood. Man, rough review.
Of Nosferatu the film or Nosferatu the concept?
Either way.
Yeah.
Yes, we are today covering Nosferatu, A Symphony of Horror.
I feel like there should be a music cue right there.
22. Yes, I would. Well, I'm too lazy to do that. Imagine a pipe organ in your head.
Mm-hmm.
It is number 16 on our list with a 97% Rotten Tomatoes score and an 87% audience score.
Wow.
Had you seen this before?
Yes. Yes. There was a quite half-assed film club at my high school run by a guy. And
okay.
One of the teachers.
How long did you date him?
He was one of the teachers. So I didn't date him, but I know the girl who did. He was trying very hard to be very cool.
Of course.
And so two of the first movies we watched in this film club were The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari and Nosferatu.
Yep.
Yeah.
Really making sure to bore those 16-year-old kids right off the bat.
I mean, the fun thing was when Count Orlok first appeared on screen, I got to say to the teacher, wow, I didn't know you were that old.
Nice. Mm-hmm. Zing.
Yep.
Got his ass.
Absolutely.
I guess it weeds out the posers, though. Then you're left with the nerds who are just like, Caligari is my shit, man.
Right. Yeah. Chien Andalou.
Yeah.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah. Did you ever see that Portlandia skit where it's basically Fred Armisen is cursed and he can never leave the house because he has a Netflix disc that he needs to watch.
Oh, yes.
So he can send it back.
Yes.
And it's had it for months. Yeah. And it's The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari.
Yeah.
And he's like, it's supposed to be really good.
Yeah.
And anyway. Today, we already talked about, I already said what we're talking about, Nosferatu. I have seen this a number of times. The number one thing that I miss about living in New York, well, two things. One,
bodegas.
Those are pretty good. especially the ones by my school. I assume they probably all do this, but they would close, but there would be a person in there 24 hours a day. So you could roll up at like 2 a.m. to the window and say, I want a bag of those hot chips and an Arizona iced tea.
Oh, that's
and he would go grab it and hand it to you through the bulletproof window.
Dude.
I was going to say diner salads.
Okay.
Because I don't know if it was just Greek diners or whatever.
I didn't know diners had salads.
Oh my God. It was the best. So it's like a regular salad, but it comes with like a scoop of like chicken salad and a scoop of like either macaroni salad or like coleslaw or something.
Okay.
Unbelievable.
All right.
Second thing I miss is I don't think they do it anymore, but when I was in college, every Halloween at the Cathedral of St. John the Divine? John or Paul? I forget which one. It's up around like 110th Street area, kind of like where sort of near where it's actually right down the street from where the Seinfeld restaurant is.
Oh.
And every Halloween they would do this thing where they would play a silent horror movie accompanied by the organist in the cathedral. Unbelievable.
That's cool.
And then after that, they would do this thing called the Procession of Ghouls, which was run by the same people who run the Halloween parade. And so basically after the movie's over, they have this big like hell mouth at the front of the church.
Oh my God, yes.
That fills with smoke.
Oh my God.
And then all of these really elaborate like I don't know how to describe the costumes. They're not like modern costumes. They're like more traditional sort of like demons and stuff.
Yeah.
Would come do a procession down the middle of the church.
That sounds fucking amazing.
Unreal. And then when you got there, as before everything started, they had a cellist up on like a pedestal wearing a skull mask playing creepy cello music.
Oh my
God. The best thing ever.
Why don't we do this everywhere?
I don't know. Honestly, the first time I went, my thought was, how did they get the Catholic Church to let them do this?
I mean, there's got to be... We got to make this happen. I need this in my life.
It was so cool.
I'm angry that I have not gotten to experience this. This is unfair.
Mm-hmm. I went a few times. I got to see Caligari. I got to see Nosferatu.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say I saw Phantom of the Opera, but I'm not 100% sure.
That's a great one to have a live organ
is,
to. Damn, that's awesome.
It was very
really
cool,
badass.
and I miss it greatly.
So you've seen Nosferatu?
I have, yes. I've seen. I got lost in my script.
I know.
Here,
I could
I was like,
see
well, what do we
you
do now?
Reminiscing.
I didn't have a good segue into the trailer. You know what? I'm going to skip the trailer on this one just because I don't think that.
You don't think people just need xylophone music for 3 minutes?
I don't know if there is anything that I could put here. I don't know. I'm going to put something here, but I don't think it's going to be the trailer. We'll find something, and we'll be back in a minute to talk about it.
It was Halloween, and they had a children's Halloween activity day at the local library. Won't this be fun? They thought, oh, let's show them an old silent horror movie. This will, because silent movies, that's for everybody. They showed us F.W. Murnau's Nosferatu to a bunch of 5 and 6 year olds.
Shit out.
Like, I'm going to watch this again just to make sure, like, maybe I'm only seeing it through my 5-year-old brain. That is one of the most terrifying, just openly disturbing film. It's all it is disturbing images. And the narrative kind of doesn't make sense. There's kind of a dream logic to it. It just kind of jumps around. So it has that 5-year-old's logic way of looking at the world where just all it is scary stuff coming in. Kids were screaming and crying, and I was freaking out, but I was very, very fascinated by how come this little square of light is making everyone. We were just in this room that was well lit. We know we're safe in the world. They put a couple of towels over the windows, and suddenly we're in hell. Yeah. Like, it just completely. And I'm like, how did that happen? And that is why I've been fascinated with film ever since, because it happened like that. And that movie, go watch Nosferatu.
It's fucking scary.
It's fucking, by today's standards, that movie is fucked up. Ugh. It's like, what the fuck? And then the woman dies at the end, like she openly sacrifices herself. Like, it's so fucked up. Oh, how are the pumpkin cookies? There's a guy, he came out of the darkness and he's like sucking people's souls.
Okay, Nosferatu from 1920. You know, I forgot to say, I think the first time I saw this was probably, I would have been one of those kids at your high school's film thing, being like, fuck yeah, man.
I mean, I was about this.
Yeah.
I just also needed to shit talk the teacher. I can multitask.
Oh, of course. Because, this was right around the time where I got my English teacher.
Always an English teacher.
Yeah. Going into, I think, the 10th grade, gave us a sheet of, the summer reading. But she made the mistake of being like, or you can watch some of these movies. And it was like 15 movies. I watched all of them.
Yeah.
It was great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mrs. Boland. But this movie is Nosferatu from 1922, directed by F.W. Murnau, written by Henrik Galeen. It is a completely original story, not based on anything. And it stars Gustav von Wangenheim, which is a real name, Alexander Granach, Greta Schroeder, John Gottwalt, Gottout. Well, I'm glad he got out.
Gatto?
Gustav Botz and Max Schreck as the first great screen vampire, Graf Orlok. I was thinking about doing the voice from the new one for this, but I thought that would be too confusing.
Yeah.
So I'll say if we ever do the new one, then
we probably will at some point.
Yeah.
So save it.
Amanda.
Yes, Clay.
What happens in Nosferatu?
Summoned to a bloodthirsty vampire's faraway castle, a young land clerk embarks on a harrowing journey into the unknown as his innocent wife falls under the spell of a terrifying shadow in her dreams.
I think for a movie like this, the synopsis should just be, it's just Dracula.
I mean, that is pretty much what I just said.
That's true.
I just said it slightly more descriptively.
Yeah, but
Yes.
we'll talk about this, why it is just Dracula, but it's so much more.
Yes. Well, Clay, some things you'll find in Nosferatu, A Symphony of Horror, include a cool and definitely normal boss.
Yep, totally normal. Just sits at his very high desk, giggling like a maniac, casually checking out the page of the Necronomicon he seems to have.
Why are you describing me? I'm confused.
Well, I mean, as long as you get your work done.
Out of control eyebrows.
Yeah.
Bad clothes.
Mostly
it's just
bald.
Me. Yeah.
5'2".
Hey, whoa! I am 5'5" and a half inches. A Paracelsian,
Which it sounds great.
follower of Paracelsus.
Of course. What's his deal? Do we know?
He was a 16th century medical reformer.
Okay.
He believed stuff like the chemical composition of your body affects its function.
Oh, wait. Is that good?
I mean, it's better than what they were doing in the 16th century.
Because
where it was just like a demon has possessed you and that's why you are menstruating.
What was the thing where for a while they believed in, was it the four humors?
Yeah.
Or something like that? And
Yes.
it was like basically like the earth, fire, wind, and water of your body. But
Yeah,
it was like
those
blood, bile.
Yes. Yeah, it was sort of like any sort of like liquid or anything like it was like blood, bile, phlegm, and
lovely.
something else. Yeah.
And that was like, they were like, this is what your body is made up of.
Yes.
All the answers are here.
Yes.
And then they discovered germs
Right.
after half the world died.
So I think Paracelsus was trying.
Is he pro-humor?
To do
Is he pro-humor or anti-humor?
I don't know. I didn't look deep enough to figure out his deal with humors, but he was a Swiss physician, alchemist, and lay theologian.
Okay, sure.
Which is a really fun thing to be, a lay theologian.
That means he doesn't know what it means, but he's going to tell you what he thinks it means.
He's going to tell you all about God.
Yes.
And what God wants you to do. A magic book pocket edition.
The best kind. You have to be able to carry
portable magic book.
the magic book with you.
It's like your pocket constitution.
Yeah. Nobody ever gets the chance to like refer to it in the moment because it's too bulky to take around generally.
That's why you get the pocket ed.
Yeah, and if it's hot, like the human flesh just sticks to your leg in your pocket, it's really annoying.
Ew. A downright cute werewolf.
Yeah, that was that was fun when they're like, look out for werewolves, and it's like a spray painted hyena.
I think it's a real thing. I think it is a striped hyena.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So he was fortunately not spray painted, which is a relief to hear.
It is the first instance of random animals being put into Dracula along with the
It's also so weird when you think about like this was a German production done in like Eastern Europe. Where the hell did they get a hyena?
Honestly, the producer Albin Grau might have just had one because we'll get into that guy a little bit.
Right.
He's pretty interesting.
Fair enough. Hubristic book spiking.
Yeah, every time I finish a book, or if I don't agree with it, I just stand up in the morning
You
and just
smile at it, kind of shake your head like, silly book.
Spike that bitch on the ground. No book learning for me.
Spike that bitch on the ground. Do you refer to all your books as bitches?
Yeah, if I don't like them.
Can I borrow that bitch from you? A big ass pipe.
Yeah, that dude it was like the size of an oboe.
It was a Bilbo Baggins size pipe.
Yeah, it looked like a musical instrument. I don't know if that was built that way
a sousaphone.
So you could like smoke your pipe while, crow quilling your letters or whatever the hell he was doing.
No idea.
And not burn yourself. I don't know. It seemed excessive.
What if it was just for the vibes?
That's cool.
A mild case of blood congestion.
Yes. That's when your humors.
Yes.
They all meet at the intersection at the same time and start beeping their horns at each other.
Because there's too much blood in the way.
Too much blood.
Yeah. Get it under control.
Get it
ladies.
out.
quote, the hellish elixir of blood.
Yes.
And that's blood with an E.
Yes, that's what my cardiologist says every time he looks at my blood work.
The hellish elixir of your blood.
Mostly donut.
And 6 crates of dirt for experimental purposes.
Yeah.
Normal shit you'd ship.
Yeah, you bring that to the post office and they're like, is there anything liquid, flammable, or breakable inside? And you're like, no, man.
No, we're good to go.
Just plague rats, that's all.
Yeah, pack it up.
So, we've got Nosferatu. Nosferatu is... I'm going to go on a limb and say that Nosferatu, Symphony of Horror, is the most important horror movie ever made.
That's a pretty strong limb. I think that limb will support you.
Okay, thank you. It's like, well, okay. It's the story of this movie, outside of the story of this movie, is very fascinating, and it's. I don't want to say that I'm pro piracy, but it's an instance where it's hard not to be.
So why do you have that fake parrot on your shoulder and a peg leg?
No, that's just for personal reasons. But yeah, the story behind this movie is very interesting as far as what happens after they make it. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But this kind of is a bedrock text, if you want to speak about it highfalutinly, for a lot of stuff that comes after it. Basically, every vampire movie that comes after this owes this something.
Yeah.
Because you've got a lot of the popular understanding of how vampires work comes directly from this, more so than it comes from the Stoker book. And I should say it adds on to it.
Yes.
And even like this is the first movie to adapt the story, and the way that they make the story more efficient is kind of the way that everybody's been doing it since.
Yeah.
Unless you are going out of your way to do, we're going to do everything in Dracula. We're going to give you all the characters.
Right.
They kind of skew very close to this as far as the way they condense some characters. This was the first movie to have the Renfield character be directly connected to Dracula / work at the same real estate place as Jonathan Harker. If I guess in the later ones Harker's kind of moved out completely, but this is the movie that invents the idea that vampires can be killed by sunlight.
Yep.
That's not in the Stoker book, and that's something that's like, if you were to ask someone, how do you kill a vampire? They would either say stake through the heart or sunlight.
Right.
And the design of the vampire in this is absolutely number 2 behind Bela Lugosi. The suave count is the rat-faced Nosferatu.
Yes. Yeah, and even the weeding out, like you were saying, weeding out specific characters, and I'm thinking specifically about Lucy.
Yep.
And that whole kind of subplot in the book and in most adaptations of Dracula, where you've got the sort of best friend and her suitors. In this, it's just like, no, we're not doing any of that.
Yeah.
Like there's another woman around, she's fine, then she's dead, whatever. Like it's not part of the plot, really.
Yeah. And that stuff is, I find that so fascinating because like you read the book and the book is such a immersive experience. But like if you take a step back, you kind of go, do we fucking really need Arthur Homewood or Quincy Morris in this? Not really.
Yeah.
You know, like we can get those guys out of here and kind of condense this a little bit. So
sure.
And one of the things that I was thinking about as we were watching this, and I don't know if this is a valid question or not, or if I'm just reaching for stuff here. Is it the mark of a great story when you can adapt it down to like the most bullet point aspects of the story and still have it work and be impactful?
I mean, I think it's the mark of a very well constructed story. And I think that's part of why it's been so enduring and why we can keep coming back to it, is because as long as you keep the central pillars of the tale, you can add and subtract the rest as you see fit.
Yeah. Oh, real quick. Sorry. This is based on Dracula's movie.
Yeah. I would hope most people know that, despite your false advertising.
Hey, there's always someone looking to go to their first high school film class. So.
But yeah, I think it's just a sign of how, it's not a perfectly constructed story. Mm-hmm. It has its flaws and its slow points. I love it. Yeah. Dracula is one of my favorites. I'm actually debating starting to reread it again. But it's definitely, a lot of people would say there's a lot of fat in the book.
Sure.
There's a lot of unnecessary details and stuff we don't care about, and shipping manifests and bullshit like that. But I do think that the strength of the basic pillars and the basic themes are what makes it so attractive for adaptations, and why the adaptations work so well.
Yeah. That first sequence of the Jonathan Harker, I'm just going to say the Jonathan Harker character, because I'm speaking kind of largely of the story in general.
Yeah.
Going to Dracula's castle is like an all-timer. Like that is so good.
Oh yeah.
Anytime that gets adapted, they don't really change it very much. It's got a lot of the same beats in it, the cutting his finger and all that kind of stuff. Because it's just so good.
Yeah, it shows you everything you need to know about what is happening here.
Yeah.
Like, it introduces you to the sort of two sides of the coin, where there's the Harker character who is like a good man trying to just live his life, and then you've got the Dracula or Count Orlok character who is this force of evil that is going to invade his life. And it puts the two of them alone in a room, essentially.
Yeah.
And then it just sort of slowly teases out like all of the weird aspects of Dracula or Orlok, and all of those sort of the more understated creepy stuff that I think just functions so well to prime you as an audience member of like, ooh, like this is both kind of gross and like so strange and off-putting and scary. Like walking around alone in this castle, or finding him in his like death-like sleep in the casket. That shit's terrifying.
Yeah.
It's like, and it doesn't require a lot of context to make scary. It just is scary.
Yeah.
You don't need to understand the time period that the thing is happening in or anything else like that. You're like, no, you're just in this castle and this is terrifying.
I do think one of the things in this, in Nosferatu here, that putting it on screen kind of accents how kind of silly it can be, is the idea that it's just Orlok or just Dracula in the castle.
Yes.
So he's like getting up real early to make this huge meal.
Yeah.
For Hutter the next day.
Yeah, that he's so excited to eat.
Yeah, and he's got this, he spent the whole day baking for when he gets there at night.
And he's apparently an amazing chef.
He looks like it. I mean, what else is he going to do?
Hutter is digging into that food with relish. Like he is zealously enjoying that meal.
He's making cakes and shit.
Yeah. Roasts.
He's been there for like 500 years.
Do you know how long a roast that big would take?
He's got time, man.
But he's doing it all
through the night when he's not eating babies. Yeah. Reminds me of my late grandmother. She had a bit of a habit, let's say,
of eating babies.
No, well, maybe little tiny babies that came in a bottle. But she was known to. One of the great stories that I was told is she used to she would wake up in the middle of the night and decide she needed to paint the inside of the fridge. So
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah, so she painted the inside of the fridge, and more than once they found her asleep on the roof. So who knows? Maybe she was a vampire. Who's to say?
I mean, she sounds kind of Orlok-like to me.
Yeah. Don't do drugs, kids. Yeah, but I think the thing with this movie though is, I think Nosferatu, even though it does come from Dracula, I think this is its own thing. Like, I think it is the elements that are portrayed in this, the way that they're portrayed, I think are iconic enough that you can separate it from Dracula pretty completely. I don't know if I'm being super clear with what I'm trying to say, but like it's okay. For instance, when this was remade, Werner Herzog remade it. Fantastic movie. The one thing I don't like about it is in that movie he uses all the names from Dracula. So the vampire's name is Dracula.
Yep.
The person who comes to the castle is Harker.
Yep.
His wife is Mina, et cetera, et cetera. And I just don't think that feels right.
Yeah.
Because the setting, the imagery, the stuff the story is about ultimately, the way it ends is so different.
Yeah.
Like I got a lot of great information about this from a podcast that I love called Hypnagoria.
Ooh.
Which the host does a lot of deep dives into stuff. He did like a 25 or 30 part series on the history of Universal horror movies.
Shit.
It's excellent.
Wow.
I highly recommend it. He just did a David Lynch series.
Ooh.
Check it out. And he said, one of the things he said about this was, even though the first half is pretty much a straight adaptation of Dracula, once Orlok gets to Germany, it really kind of starts doing its own thing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's my hesitancy with what you were saying is I don't think you can totally separate it from Dracula, nor do I think you necessarily should. Just in the sense that I don't really know what that provides. Like
Sure.
saying like, no, these two things are totally different. They have nothing to do with each other. It's like, no, I mean, I think demonstrably they do.
Yeah.
They've just gone in such different directions that the themes they're dealing with and what they're trying to say are very, very different.
Yeah.
But they are coming from the same root story. They're just taking that story in vastly different directions at a point.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's an insult. You know what I mean? I don't think that makes either one a lesser interpretation. I just think it's, I mean, how many times do humans retell the same stories over and over and over again?
Yeah.
And we can take them based off of like myths and fairy tales or biblical stories or whatever, and we take them in such different directions that they do become their own thing. But they're all, when you go back, it's like, oh, this is actually, both of these stories are based on Cain and Abel or something like that.
I guess, the way that I process them in my brain is I think that Count Orlok is a very separate character from Dracula.
Yeah. Yes.
So like that's kind of more where I'm coming from.
Okay.
Where it's like I see them existing parallel to each other, not necessarily the same character.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I guess what I'm saying is I don't think you get to Nosferatu without having Dracula.
Very literally, you do not.
Like,
yes,
you don't get the one without the other one that preceded it. But yeah, I don't think that lessens the fact that like these are very unique interpretations of the characters that fill these specific roles in the narrative.
Yeah.
They've taken them in a totally different direction.
Yeah. To use a more modern example that is not connected to this whatsoever, one of my favorite sci-fi action movies is RoboCop. And they remade RoboCop a handful of years ago to very little fanfare.
Yes.
And when I saw it, the thing that bummed me out about it was that they used the same character name. So the main character was Alex Murphy. And the reason that bummed me out is because I think the character of Alex Murphy has such a specific story that they tell in the original that doing what they did in this other one just like didn't. I wish they had just used a different character name.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of thing where it's like, if someone did an adaptation of Dracula that had a second half that was all about like the plague, I would go like, no, that's not Dracula. That's Nosferatu.
Yes. Yeah. And I think, the longevity has a lot to do with it as well. This movie is over 100 years old.
Which is wild.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was, like you're saying, the first film adaptation of the story, right? Like, this is the first film adaptation of Dracula.
There's a movie that predates it called like Dracula's buddy or something. It doesn't count. But this is the first like
Dracula's buddy.
The first like honest attempt to adapt it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think maybe by transitioning it into such a different medium, you're also transforming it in a way, and it gives you its own unique visual language that wasn't based off of a prior movie. This was the first Nosferatu movie. So
I kind of wish we had already done the Lugosi Dracula, which amazingly we haven't done yet.
Yeah, that is shocking, actually.
Because I would love to be able to talk about them in comparison to each other. Because as much as I love the Lugosi Dracula, there's something that just doesn't feel as like kind of honest as this movie does. And I think I think in this movie, I think a lot of it has to do with the setting of it and the time period it takes place in, because it gives it a lot more of like a folk horror kind of edge to it.
Sure.
Because the thing with Dracula that I didn't realize until much later is that Dracula is not a period piece, the movie.
Right.
It takes place in like the 30s.
Right.
Which you only really notice because there's one cutaway scene where there's cars driving around.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, this takes place in present day.
Yeah.
And, I think that kind of undercuts the vibe a little bit.
Sure.
But the way, especially the way that this is presented, which is actually very similar to the book, Nosferatu is actually kind of presented as an epistolary.
Yes.
Because all of the cards you're reading are, you're basically reading it as though someone is either telling it to you or like you're reading someone's journal.
Right. Because the title cards are mostly in first person.
Yeah.
When there is any sort of point of view stated, it's somebody saying, oh, I remember like Hutter would recount these nightmarish visions he had to me.
Yeah.
And I always assumed they were this and that. Like there is a first person narrator in those title cards.
Yeah.
So it does feel like the same epistolary style in a way.
And I really like that because it adds a real sense of, it makes it feel almost like a fairy tale.
Yeah.
That way of presenting it, plus the time period they set it in, and everything about this version feels much more almost like Brothers Grimm do Dracula.
Do you think part of that is the title cards themselves, though? Like having these things written down and having to read them, and they're in this like fancy Gothic script. Like I mean that feels like a connection to me. Like you're reading a page out of the Magic Book Pocket Edition.
Yeah,
like
basically,
that's what it feels like. And the way we try and recreate that effect now, and the way we've tried for decades now to recreate that effect, is voiceover. Right. You know, you get the voiceover of Keanu Reeves reading out loud the letter he's writing to Mina as a montage happens, or a soaring camera, glances over the castle. And that just doesn't have the same effect. It doesn't.
Every time I watch Bram Stoker's Dracula, the thing that takes me out of it immediately is when he's reading the letter he gets from Dracula, and he's like, "I cannot wait to see you at my castle." And then he goes, D.
Yeah.
Your friend.
D.
Yeah. Yeah, that works a lot better if you're reading it than having to say it.
Yeah, but I think that exact thing is an example of why this movie still works in a lot of ways, where it builds this fairy tale feeling.
This is the first found footage movie, you're right.
Yeah. But you're getting it in these pieces of writing, and then when you're watching the action of the movie, you're getting these uninterrupted scenes of just whatever the characters are doing and the music. And you're not trying to keep up with any dialogue. You're not sort of thrown off by anybody's weird accents or anything like that. You're just focused on the visual in front of you. And then this little snippet kind of pops up, and the little snippet that pops up in the title cards can either be directly related to what's happening on screen in terms of this is what's on the book page that Ellen is reading right now, or it can be some additional context that we didn't have and didn't know about, and now we do.
Yeah.
And I think there's something to be said about the way that used to flow in silent films, that now we have to try and recreate that effect in the talkies.
Right.
And it's harder to do. It's harder to just interrupt your movie with like a static image of a bunch of words. You'd be like, all right, read this for the next 30 seconds and then we'll move on.
Yeah, it really did add a dreamlike kind of nature to movies at the time, because you know, you are the buzzword that people always use for movies now is they want them to be as immersive as possible.
Yes.
And
people love immersion.
And these movies, these silent films, there's almost an extra layer keeping you out.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes it feel even more unreal or uncanny than the fact that you're just watching a bunch of still photographs moving past your face very quickly.
Yeah.
Like there's a little bit extra bit of magic to it when you're not allowed in completely to hear exactly what everybody's saying, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and I think that's
how far I've gone the other direction from modern filmmaking.
Yeah.
Is I'm a silent film purist now.
You're so disillusioned by it. You're
Fuck
just
digital
like,
filmmaking.
I don't want to even hear a voice.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I think part of the charm is that it's not trying to hide the fact that it's telling you a story.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, it's not trying to convince you that this is real right now and that you are one of the characters, or you should take the point of view of one of the characters. It's not trying to convince you that this could happen down the street from you. Mm-hmm. It's just showing you the story.
Right.
And letting the story have whatever effect on you that it'll have.
Yeah. Well, we should probably talk about the story a little bit.
Yeah.
This might be a long one. One of the things that I appreciate is that, we get into this and it is very similar setup to Dracula, except for changed setting, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. But it does maintain the extreme unhorniness of the Jonathan Harker character, Hutter.
I would argue that in some interpretations, in compared to some Dracula versions, this character is even less horny.
Yeah,
he is like a child.
Yes, he is very childlike.
Yes, he is just this bumbling kind of dweeb. Like, the word I wrote down was ninny. Yeah. Like he is just...
He's a bit of a ponce, as they would say.
He's just grinning at everyone and everything and kind of, like, trouncing around and, like, skipping through the flowers. Like, and he's having a great time, and I say good for him. But it is... You know me, and all of anybody who listens to this knows me. I am a big proponent of the sort of underlying themes of homoeroticism in the original Dracula. Yeah. I think there's a lot of like gender fuckery happening in in that book and a lot of the movie versions. And
there was a rumor people think that Stoker was gay.
Yeah,
and that he was in love with I can't remember the guy's name. The guy who he worked for, the guy who ran the theater he worked for.
Oh.
Who people claim that he based Dracula on this guy.
Yeah.
I can't remember the guy's name.
I don't buy it, but yeah. I know the rumor exists.
He's as gay as Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah.
Equally provable.
Yeah. But there are other versions of this story where I say, like, oh, there's like weird sexual tension between Dracula and Harker, even if there's no sexual tension between Harker and Mina.
Yeah.
In Nosferatu, there is like no sexual tension anywhere near Hutter.
No.
Like none of it. None of it. He is just this. I don't know. He reminds me of in Tarot. He reminds me of the Fool.
Okay.
Like, where that's not an insult. Like the Fool card in Tarot is if you pull the Fool and you say, this is your card is the Fool. It's not an insult. It's not calling you an idiot. Mm-hmm. It's about naivete and inexperience.
Okay. It's
the person before they have gone on any sort of journey or development or maturation. Mm-hmm. And that's what Hutter makes me think of.
Yeah.
That he is this sort of like trusting and happy-go-lucky blank slate at the beginning of the movie, especially.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. with these early movies, I think it's very easy to ascribe a sense of subversiveness to them that might not actually be there.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it is. Like, I know with Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, there was a big thing about like having to change the ending because the government, yada, yada, yada.
Et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. But, I wonder here, like if you want to say the sexual politics of this movie, if there are any, are so weird that I don't know if they are intentional or if it's just like in the early days of film, we don't know what we can and can't get away with.
Sure.
And also we don't want, because, obviously this is well before there was any rating system or the Hays, anything like that.
Yeah.
But still, there's stuff that mainstream films didn't do.
Oh, yeah.
But here it's like, I don't know if the relationship between Hutter and his wife is the way that it is for subtextual purposes, or if it's just like, well, we can't actually show them relating to each other in any way because it would be too scandalous.
Yeah, I don't know. It does show them kiss though.
True.
Like they embrace a lot and they do kiss.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of it is more about Hutter as this pure soul. Like he's sort of like whereas in Dracula, Mina is the purity. I think in this it's Hutter, and
he should have killed the vampire.
But no, I think that's why Ellen sacrifices herself for him. Mm-hmm. It's like he's so good and he's so pure and he's so kind and just like happy to be here kind of guy that like he's the innocent in it. I know the book always says an innocent maiden must give her blood,
right? But
she's much more aware of like the anxiety of the situation from jump.
Yes,
like she's I will say I don't want to bring too much of the Robert Eggers version of Nosferatu into this, but I was shocked how much of Eggers' Ellen is just this Ellen.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
like I really forgot that. I forgot how close these characters are.
Yeah, he really does just extrapolate it out from this point. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that means that from the jump, there's a little bit of darkness to Ellen.
Yep.
Right away. And I think that's intentional. I think that's on purpose. Like she is sensing things and is aware of things in a way that Hutter is not.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
And so that makes her wiser than him, and it leaves him in this sort of like state of innocent ignorance, and I think she wants to preserve that however she can by the end.
Yeah, especially
so it's less about sex and more about like the goodness of someone's soul.
Sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I found that bit interesting this time because I was keying in on, maiden pure of heart is the only thing, kill him. And I'm like, well, everybody knows what that's a euphemism for.
Right.
And these two are married.
Yeah.
So.
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Or not, or no wink, winks or
nudge,
nudges, depending on,
Right.
Maybe that's why she's so depressed. So yeah, like that element of it was a little bit, I don't know if that's by design or if that's just a result of early days of filmic storytelling or what.
Yeah.
But regardless, it makes for a very interesting read.
Yeah. Yeah, and I do think it's at minimum it's there to sort of draw your attention to the differences between, the stark contrast of sending somebody who's like Hutter into Orlok's orbit.
Yeah.
Like even when he's embarked on his journey and he arrives at the inn, at the tavern, he's all giddy and he's so excited to be there and he's pounding the table because he's so excited at that first drink and he's, yelling at them to bring me my dinner quickly because I have to go to the Count's castle. And they're all horrified and he's still sort of like, it's fine.
Yeah.
Everything's great.
And even in this one, they're like, don't go. He's like, all right.
Yeah.
I can wait.
We don't care how much you pay us. We will not go further than this. And he's just like,
cool.
That's annoying.
Bring
Fine.
another
Bye.
loaf of bread.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he's living the life of a carefree capitalist,
Yeah.
while his wife is at home hanging out by the beach cemetery,
Where I want to be.
brooding over
every
the fact
day.
that the evil is coming.
Yes.
It's so. This movie has so much amazing imagery in it that is butts up against this Hutter character, which is such a. My dog has serious thoughts about this movie.
Yes, he does.
That butts up so hard against this Hutter character
Yes.
that's like just, a goofball.
Yeah. He's literally skipping through the fields picking flowers for her.
Right, yeah.
And they live across from this ominous abandoned building. And Ellen is crying because the flowers are now dead when he picks them. Like, everyone else is anxious and kind of gothy.
Yeah.
And then Hutter is just like, what do you mean? Come on, this is great. Like, I love my life. I love you. This is wonderful. So I do think it's like there for that contrast, and less to say anything about his manhood and more just to say like he is living in a very different world than the people around him.
People keep asking me if you're okay, and I just don't see it.
Yeah, babe, we're great, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, my boss likes to draw these funny little pictures.
Yeah, some people just don't get up till 2:00 in the afternoon. Yeah. It's just how they are.
Whatever, man.
Blood congestion, maybe that could be a reason. So this does change a lot of the characters. Definitely changes their names, but it also changes their influence on the story. I like that they simplify the focus down to essentially once they get back to the stuff in Germany.
Yes.
It really kind of becomes Ellen's movie.
Yeah.
Because Hutter is kind of just like on the fainting couch the whole time.
Right.
And she is the one who is being overcome by the sensations
Yes.
and et cetera.
She's the one sleepwalking out on the balconies at night and saying he is coming and, understanding on some level that the others do not what is about to happen. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you like that they don't ever try to give you an explanation about why she has this weird connection other than just she's, I guess, sensitive or
She's
something?
just a spooky lady.
Yeah.
I
Unlike the new one when they're like, we used to know each other when we were young or whatever. We were in the same homeroom.
You gonna do that the entire time we do the Eggers version?
Yes.
Oh boy, your throat is gonna be mad at you the next day. I think
I wrote you a note. Do you like me? Yes or no?
I think in this movie, in this time period, it works to just be like, I don't know, she senses stuff. Like, how would you explain that in 1922?
Well, all right, let's just stop dancing around this. The worst part about this is the fucking music.
Yeah.
Because everything about this movie is so good.
You have been holding that in.
I have.
For 47 minutes.
Everything about this, the visuals are so good.
Yes.
The stuff with her is so good. The beach cemetery is so good. The castle is Orlok is so good.
The boat.
The boat is unbelievable. The first time that he attacks Hutter is like one of the best sequences ever put to film.
Yeah.
But since they had to do a full recreation of the original version, we get the original music, or at least a partial score recreation by Hans Erdmann, which is like a fucking calliope music.
Yeah.
So it's like you're
What was the early Disney animation with the skeletons dancing in the graveyard?
I would have preferred that.
That's all I could think of through so much of this movie. And like it's so unfortunate if you watch this version and you get this, recreation or extrapolation of the original soundtrack. It's so unfortunate that in these moments that if the soundtrack were a little different, you'd be like, man, this is terrifying.
It really...
Instead, you're kind of like...
It really took me out of the movie this time.
Yeah. Me too.
It's, I'm watching it, and the point where he gets to the castle, right, and he meets Orlok for the first time.
Yeah.
I was like, I remember this being like creepier.
Yeah.
And instead it's just like, hello, my name's Orlok. Nice to meet you. And I'm like, why doesn't this play right anymore for me? And then it's because when he shows up to the castle, it's like, what? And it's okay, yeah. Then you got this weird dude wearing like a chef's hat. It's very goofy, and it's just, he's being creepy,
He's
looking
got
at
the
his
hands like this,
looking at his wife's picture, and it's like, it's just, man, it fucking killed it. It ruined it for me.
Yeah, and maybe that would have been terrifying back in the day.
Yeah,
but it's not now.
Listen,
it's rough.
Germany, we know you love the Glockenspiel. You don't need to use it on everything.
I don't even think it's a glockenspiel.
I don't know. I just wanted to say the word.
Xylophone,
Yeah.
just like tickling the ivories.
The other thing, the first time I saw this was in black and white. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until later that I learned more about silent film that I knew of and saw a version that had the original film tinting.
Yeah.
I understand why they do it.
Yeah.
But even that wasn't working for me.
I was going to ask you about that because there were times where I liked it and there were times where I did not. Mm-hmm. Like I enjoyed it in certain scenes, like the sequence where the villagers have said to Hutter, "This is as far as we will take you. We are out," and he just sort of starts kind of wandering on his own. And the tint goes from this sort of golden yellow to like a blue or a bluish green. And then the carriage comes to pick him up. And then that whole sequence with the tint and everything. I actually thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
To switch it from like he has left the normal world and entered into this other realm, and having the tint reflect that was kind of neat. And then there were some sequences where it's tinted kind of that warmer yellow tone for like the light indoors.
Right.
And then when it's nighttime outside, it's that darker blue. I was like, okay, that's an interesting way of doing it. But then, yeah, there was sometimes where I was just like, I wish this was just black and white. Like I missed the contrast.
Yeah. Like I get it, because if you don't do that, it becomes very obvious that everything outside is shot in the middle of the day.
Right.
Because they didn't have lights.
Right.
that
Yeah.
they could use outside.
Yeah. No.
But like, I don't know. The stuff in the castle, the first time Orlok attacks him.
Yeah, it's
in
like
black
sepia tone.
Yeah,
in
in
this.
black and white, it's so creepy.
Yeah.
So scary.
I think Orlok is a lot scarier looking in black and white.
Yeah.
I think that sort of that high contrast, visual of him works better than the tinted like yellowish. I don't know.
Yeah.
Just doesn't.
I
doesn't
also,
hit quite the same.
all of my criticisms here are basically me chasing a phantom that doesn't exist anymore. Because, like, similarly, I kind of don't like seeing this movie in such high quality.
Yeah.
Because, again, when he gets to the castle, the first time he sees Orlok, I'm like, I can basically see, like, the makeup.
Yeah, there's one scene especially where he goes into the basement for the first time and sees him asleep in the coffin and the like two little front teeth.
Yeah, they look like cardboard.
Yeah, they look like paper just stuck in his mouth. And it's like, oh.
Yeah, and I'm like, I don't one of the bits of mystery behind this movie, because since it was became essentially illegal for a long time. Lots of mystery and history and legend grew in its wake. One of the most prominent bits is that for a while people thought Max Schreck didn't exist. Oh. Because his name, Schreck, is like, it either is or is very close to the German word for fear.
Oh,
and so
wow.
There's an entire movie called Shadow of the Vampire, which posits that Max Schreck was an actual vampire.
Right.
Which is something that people had said over the years.
Yeah. It's the original of the Blair Witch Project, when they were like, those kids were really out there and they died. Yeah.
And, one of the things that always really worked for me with this movie is the fact that there wasn't a ton of information, at least at the time when I was younger, before the internet, to really parse out what this was.
Yeah.
And the makeup is so uncanny.
Yeah.
But also so slick, if you want to call it slick, that you kind of don't know where the makeup stops. Like I don't want to.
Right.
Like, I've seen a picture of Max Schreck.
Right. Like, what does his nose really look like?
I don't want to know.
Like, yeah, I want to keep the big ridiculous.
Yeah. And I like the idea of, the shots towards the end where he's looking at her through the window.
Yeah.
He's got this like very phantom kind of look to him that if you're watching the movie in HD,
right,
it kind of takes that layer of dreamlike element away from it.
Yeah, that's the sort of like softening of some of the details definitely makes it more believable.
Yeah.
And more of this sort of indelible image rather than a guy in makeup and prosthetics.
And it feels so much more like you found something that just like willed itself into existence, and it isn't a movie that someone went out and made,
Yeah.
Because if you find a copy, you can find this movie's public domain. It's all over the place. You can find really roughed up copies on the internet and stuff.
Yep.
And when you watch those, it's like it has this strange supernatural kind of feel to it, where it's like, what is this?
I mean, there's a reason why we are still to this day kind of freaked out by movies that include photos or video from an earlier time. There's something inherently creepy about that.
Yeah.
Where it's like, I mean, this is maybe a bad example, but like the movie Sinister.
Yep.
Where he finds the old home movies going back 30, 40 years in the attic. And some of the creepiest ones are the ones from like the 70s because they are grainier and there's something off about them. Or even, The Ring, where like the video in The Ring is this weird amalgamation of images and most of them are pretty old-timey looking. You're not getting like an image of a cell phone.
Right.
You're getting an image of a bunch of horses jumping off a cliff.
Yeah.
Like there's something about that idea of this is some footage from the past and it becomes inherently unknowable and therefore much more frightening than just like, I don't know, a guy in a room.
Yeah. I don't know what it is about old damaged film that just generates an uneasiness. Yeah. As though like it's damaged because someone didn't finish the job or something. Like,
right.
Like this was meant to be destroyed
or hidden.
Yeah.
And so it's been left to degrade somewhere. Yeah. That kind of vibe.
Which is honestly what this movie became eventually, which we'll get into in a bit.
Yeah.
Do you like the Orlok look?
I do. I have mixed feelings about it because I definitely do think it's like a vaguely anti-Semitic
that's
baseline.
Unfortunately, that is
rough.
Definitely a read of the movie.
Yeah, and I definitely think it's a read of the movie on purpose of this idea of this like grotesque looking foreigner from Eastern Europe coming to Germany or wherever, London, and bringing with them horror and tragedy and pestilence. Like that was a very common through line in people's thoughts about Jewish people who were forced out of their homelands by various pogroms and diasporic tragedies. Like,
well, luckily the people of Germany worked that out of their system very quickly.
Yeah, in like 1922, right?
Yeah, that was it. That was the height of it.
Yeah, they never went worse than this.
No,
and no one ever did again. But so it's tough. You're thinking about it in the historical context, and that is the vision it's giving to the watcher. Like that's on purpose of this sort of like, this is what we think foreign people look like. And we're going to take these stereotypically Jewish traits and we're going to hyper exaggerate them. And isn't that the most terrifying thing you've ever seen? But on the other hand, it is actually freaky.
Yeah.
Like it is, Orlok is this uncanny humanoid creature.
Yeah.
In a way that Dracula is not. Like, Dracula,
at least the way Dracula is generally portrayed in the movies.
Yeah, there are moments in the books where Dracula is described as more uncanny himself, but typically in like the visual representations we get of Dracula, he is always humanoid unless he has suddenly turned into bats or has suddenly turned into a wolf.
Bat?
Yeah, human form. But when he's human, he's kind of a suave, either he's the suave count or even if he's the old count, he's maybe an eccentric looking guy, but he's just a guy.
Right.
Whereas Orlok is immediately recognizable as something not quite human. So long as he's not wearing a chef's hat.
Yes. Yeah, this is the first time I realized he wears that funny hat to hide his ears.
Yeah.
Never occurred to me before.
Yeah, with the tufts of hair sticking out of them and his like bulbous white head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love that he gets more gruesome as the movie goes on.
Yeah, I hadn't noticed that until you pointed it out, that like his ears get more prominent, his fingers get longer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a cool little detail.
It is.
And I think he works for the time very well. Again, as I've said before, I don't like seeing Dracula's feet. And I think, I with certain characters and certain imagery, there's a certain way that you show them to maximize their impact.
Yeah.
And if you, like if you turn the lights on them, the mystery goes away. They get very close to that in this when they show him running around town with a coffin under his arm.
That was my one part of this where I was like, okay, this is just kind of silly.
Yeah.
Like, I understand that it does help simplify a lot of what they sort of have to. Because in Dracula, in the book and in most of the movie adaptations, that section is like Dracula has somehow hired guys.
That's the one part of Dracula I've never liked.
To come to the ghost ship and pick up his boxes of dirt and deliver them places for him. And it takes some explaining.
Yeah.
And so for the sake of the narrative and the smoothness of like, we're just moving along. We just got to keep it going. It's like, cut all those guys out and he just carries his own dirt. But it's also a little silly. Like, it's a little silly to see Orlok doing manual labor, even though it doesn't seem to be very difficult for him.
Yeah. It's funny. It looks like he's carrying his coffin looking for his new house. And he's
Yes.
I can't recall.
Yeah.
What street?
Is this one 118? No, it's further up. Oh, okay. Thank you. Have a nice night.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Could you show me to my new house?
Yeah, it is. So that part's a little silly looking.
I do love that they even cut out the middleman where he's packing the cart at the castle, and then he gets into the coffin, and then the top of it just moves on top.
He just psychically puts it on,
and then it just drives away.
Yeah. Self-driving cars.
Yeah.
Way back.
Why
then.
do you think that the guys on the ship, when they were checking those boxes and discovered they were full of rats, put the rest of the boxes onto the ship?
Gotta do a job.
I don't know.
Getting paid to do this job. You gotta do this job. Commerce doesn't stop for one little plague.
Yeah, I guess not. Yeah. Well, so let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
Because that is, as we said earlier, that is a element that is not really part of the Dracula story in the book.
Correct.
And I think it is a really great addition.
Yeah. I do too. I totally agree.
Yeah.
Because I think it adds that sort of layer of is Orlok even not is he real, but like how much of this is Orlok and how much of this is the plague?
Sure.
And having that level of it gives the rest of the townspeople a sort of cover explanation for what's going on. So it's not like, why are all these people dropping dead? It's like, oh no, the plague is here.
Yeah.
And then Orlok can operate beneath it. And I think it does a lot of heavy lifting thematically too.
Oh, big time, yeah.
Of the idea of this consuming plague that is going to come for you from afar, from a foreign place. And once it is here, it is this unstoppable force of nature and death.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think it works. It dovetails so well with the concept of the vampire that it is this creeping evil that's going to sneak into your home and destroy the ones you love.
Yeah, I think thematically it's more interesting than most of the stuff in the book.
Yeah.
It maintains its level of dread, in a very different way than the book does. Because like in the book, ultimately the story of Dracula is a very small scale story.
Yes.
And him showing up in England doesn't really affect a ton of people.
Yeah, I mean, him turning Lucy is the thing.
That's basically it.
But she starts killing children.
Oh, that's right.
So like, but it's
But
still,
either way,
it's local.
it's very-
it's local.
yeah, very
it
localized.
becomes a local mystery.
Yeah,
of-
and it's not like the town starts falling into despair. They're like,
Right.
"Oi, load of kids being killed."
right.
That's pretty much it.
Yeah, slightly more than usual. Even. Yeah.
And in this, like, there's this when he gets to Germany, this Paul comes with him.
Yes.
You know, they talk
Yes.
about in the title cards and stuff like being caught in the shadow of the vampire.
Right.
And that's what it is.
Yeah.
You know, it's the whole town is just starts to die
Yep.
when he shows up, which
Yes,
is really
he's,
cool.
He's such a force that he is sucking the life out of an entire city.
And it goes a long way for a character type whose main thing is biting people and sucking their blood out. You can't really do that so much
Right.
in these old movies.
Right.
And so he doesn't even, the only time you ever see him bite anybody is Ellen at the end.
Yeah.
But you get how much of a destructive force he is because of the rest of the rest of the town starts just to die when he shows up.
Right. And not only that, he causes mass hysteria.
Yeah.
You know, by the end of the movie, I think the title cards even explain that, like, with the plague and everything happening, the people needed a villain. They needed
Right.
something to turn against, and
Yeah.
they choose Knock. They choose Hutter's boss, who's gone mad. And it ends in a mob.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
there's a mob roaming the city and the area around it, blaming this one man for all of this destruction. And it really shows, like, not only has the town been physically affected in terms of their health, but they've been mentally affected. This has come in and it's corrupted them physically and mentally.
Yep.
And I think that, yeah, I love that addition too.
In my head, I had remembered that they kill Knock.
Same.
I don't know if maybe they do that in the Herzog version. You know what? They definitely, not in the same way. They do it obviously in the Eggers one.
Yeah.
But maybe they do it, the mob kills him in the Herzog. I honestly can't remember.
I
But
haven't seen that
it
one in a long
feels
time.
like they should kill him. Like,
Yeah.
that feels like the end of that story.
Yeah,
is he
there's a
gets killed
scene
by
where
the
they
mob.
like knock over a scarecrow, and I thought, like, is that supposed to be him? And
Yeah.
like, I don't think so, because they're still running.
And again, I don't know if it's because of the music, but I found that middle section to kind of drag a bit.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's that it is just kind of draggy, or if it is that the music was just like when they start chasing Knock, it turns into like a Keystone Cops routine with that
That's
music.
when we really that's when we really need that music. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that stuff is all a great addition, and I think that's one of the important things that separates it from Dracula for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, definitely. And I like that because it also explains why the hysteria, like why Hutter and Ellen's hysteria is kind of ignored. You know, why there's not like family and friends showing up to them being like, what the hell
Right.
happened to you? What's going on here? It's like, no, everybody's fucked
Oh, it's
right now. Yeah.
so cool.
Yeah.
The guy going door to door, right, drawing the crosses on the door, and
Yep.
then the line of caskets down the
Yeah,
street.
that looked like a street in the old city of Old Town in Bratislava that
Oh, really?
I like stayed at.
Yeah. Apparently,
So I was like, oh shit, like this looks very familiar, minus the procession of caskets.
well, that's only on Wednesdays.
Yeah.
Apparently, the places that they shot, the town that they shot in, almost all of the locations are still there and
Oh.
basically look identical.
Wow.
Like the building that is ostensibly Carfax Abbey or whatever
Yeah.
is still there.
Holy shit.
Yeah, 100 years later.
Jeez,
And it's-
where is it?
I forget. Somewhere in Germany.
Okay.
Some town.
Was it country? Just
Yeah.
yeah.
They shot some in Germany. They shot some in Prague.
Ah, that makes sense.
And then the castle stuff, I think, was somewhere more rural. I can't remember exactly where.
Yeah.
But yeah, that kind of brings us to the end sequence where, and I mean, maybe that's why I think the middle of this drags, because like the beginning and the end are just like guitar solos.
Yeah.
Like the final sequence when Ellen decides that she's going to sacrifice herself.
Yeah.
And you have that moment where she's like throws open the windows while Orlok is watching her, and he's got a look in his face like he just saw boobs for the first time. And then just casually,
he's like, I'm coming over.
I will be right there.
But
Is your mother asleep?
It's so well done because at this point, Hutter has gotten home and the ship has arrived. I don't know how he beat the ship or got there at the same time as the ship. Who cares?
Again, sorry. That's another thing that's so interesting to me about this, because they try to maintain Hutter as like this hero character, but the movie is the story so much shifts to Ellen.
Yeah.
That having him come back is just like, who gives a shit?
The reason he comes back is to deliver her the book.
Yeah. I think, you're right.
That's it. That's why he has to come back. It's to give her the book that she then reads and sees. The only way to stop this creature is for a maiden to give her blood willingly so that he ignores the first cock crow of the morning. And that's the only reason he needs to come back. That is the purpose his return serves.
Yeah, you're right.
And so I think that's so interesting, though, because it really does make him sort of not a Deus Ex Machina, but he's a messenger rather than the hero, like
sure,
he needs to come back so that she can read this book so that she can look at it and go, oh shit. But it works so well. Like he brings this mysterious book back and she cannot help but be intrigued by it and drawn to it, and it gives her the information she needs, and you can see her hatch. Like, you don't need the dialogue. You can just see her hatch the plan.
Yeah.
Like, you see it happen. She reads it. A little bit of time passes. Things are getting worse. She reads it again. And then you see her sort of visually come to this conclusion. And you kind of know what's going to happen even then. That like she has made some sort of decision. And so when that ending sequence begins where she wakes up and sort of tells him, you have to go get the doctor for me to send Hutter away, like, it all makes sense. It's all so well placed and like well set up that it's really impressive for a movie. Like, I don't know, it's impressive to do all of this with no real dialogue, other than those title cards.
I love when movies take their time. Well, I guess they had to back then, but take their time to deliver those kinds of internal character things silently. I went to see the Somerville Theater was playing The Wild Bunch in 70 millimeter this past weekend, which is one of my favorite movies. And so I went to see that, and there's a bit at the end right before they kind of make their right before the big gunfight, where the characters, one of the group is being tortured by the bad guy, and they've basically ostensibly written the guy off, and the leader of the group, they're trying to pretend like they don't care about this guy and just drown themselves in women and booze and everything, but they're all pretty annoyed and kind of sad that they've written off their friend. And there's a sequence that's just like 2 or 3 minutes long where nobody says anything, but they just look at each other. And they all kind of know what the other one is thinking. And then the main guy just goes, let's go. And then that's the only thing that's said. And then they all get together and like load up their guns and go. It's so good.
They can make that decision without words.
Yeah. It's great stuff.
And this is the sort of famous sequence in this movie too, with the shadows.
Yes.
Like Orlok's shadow coming up the stairs.
Brilliant.
And like,
people have been ripping that off literally for 100 years.
Yeah. And they don't even, people, I think a lot of times you'll see it in other stuff and you won't even fully register that that's what it is and this is where it's from. But this is where it's from.
It's crazy. This movie is 103 years old. It's been remade twice. Both of the remakes try to do a riff on it. Not as good either time. Like this original of him, the shadow coming up the stairs. Perfect. Yeah, because his silhouette is so uncanny at this point. Like, his fingers have gotten so long and the ears are so big and pointy. And then having her dressed in this like
just white nightgown and that image of his shadowy hand coming up and then seeming to grab her heart, and she sort of twists in agony on the bed. It's so good.
Yeah, and the more or less still shot of him actually feeding on her is like, it's like a painting. It's so good.
Yeah,
where you've got the window on, you can see out through the window, so you can see that the sun hasn't come up yet, and it's very dark in the corner where he is, and he's just like hunched over her.
Yeah,
he's not even clearly. He's not in. They don't have clear light on him. Like he's kind of obscured a bit. It's beautiful.
And he is like crouched by the bed.
Yeah.
You know, he's not like on top of her. There's nothing really. And again, I don't know if this is because of the time period or if it was intentional, but there's nothing really overtly sexual about the feeding itself.
No.
You know, there's
that sure changed in the new one.
Yeah. There's hints of it in the general setup of, like, you know, this married woman has sent her husband away and a stranger has entered her bedchamber at night.
Right.
Like, there's something vaguely like, okay, yeah, you can read into that.
And the whole catalyst is Orlok going like, so it's your wife, huh?
Nice neck.
Yeah. You're not having sex with her.
He literally says that she has a nice neck.
Yeah.
That's the compliment. But in the end, that's kind of not what it's about. Do you know what I mean? Like it is this sort of more mindless, animalistic approach to, I am hungry and so I will eat. You know, the same way like a plague. It's like a plague does not target people because it hates the people.
Right.
It's just a plague. This is what it does.
Yeah. As he says in the new one, all I am is an appetite.
Yeah.
Paraphrase. Yeah. So the sun comes up. And really, all-timer reaction
he
shot.
To sneak by.
All-timer, where he pulls off of Ellen, and he's got a look that's as close to an oh shit look as you can possibly come with a vampire.
Yeah, almost a deer in headlights look. Yeah.
And then my favorite thing ever is he like tries to quickly sneak by the sun. Like he just
like
stole a chapstick or something.
Maybe it won't see me if I move quick.
Yeah. Yeah. Like he's trying to avoid the teacher seeing him as he goes by the homeroom door. And of course he gets blasted and he disappears into smoke. Yep.
And then Hutter returns just in time to see his wife die.
Yep. That's all anybody can ask, right? Yeah. Nosferatu.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Good stuff. So the story behind this movie. This is known as obviously F.W. Murnau's Nosferatu masterpiece, but one of the guy
that's a very yada 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 way of saying it.
It's been 100 years.
Yeah.
Put somebody else's name on the poster. The producer of this movie was a guy named Albin Grau, and he was a driving force to get this movie made. And I think one of the reasons that it has such a strange kind of occultish feel to it is that Albin Grau, noted occultist, famously, and he belonged to a number of groups, including one that would eventually be taken over by Aleister Crowley. I can't remember the name of it. I think it might have been the one that turned into the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. But I'm not 100% sure. I can't remember what the name was.
Not Thelema.
I don't remember.
Yeah.
Listen to Hypnagogia. But in addition to that, he did all of the production art. He designed the look of Orlok. He did like the poster art and everything. So like the visual look of this movie
definitely
comes from
drew
him.
Those notes that Nock is looking at.
Yes, and those are apparently like legitimate occult symbols that he put onto this paper.
Some of them I recognized.
And of course you did. And the most interesting thing about this is that, and I wonder if this goes into the way that this movie is structured, he says that the idea for this movie came from an incident that occurred to him when he was a soldier in World War I.
Okay.
He was up in the Balkans, and he encountered this villager who, they were all like, you know, it's cold out, they're all huddled into this hut or whatever, and there's this like old guy from the town, and he's like, you guys better watch out. This place is lousy with vampires. And they're like, what are you talking about? And he says, well, when I lived in Romania, I had a run-in with a vampire. And then he tells him a story about how when his father died, he died. He was crushed by a tree, and so he died without being given the last rites.
Ooh.
And after they buried him,
Crushed by a tree.
People in the town started to get sick. And so they were like, obviously, the guy who didn't get the last rites, vampire.
Yeah.
So they went to his grave at night, opened the coffin, and he wasn't there. And then they came back the next day, and he was there. And so they drove a stake through his heart, and they burned his body and scattered his ashes to the four winds.
Cool.
And so it was the telling of this story, the relaying of this story to Albin Grau, that kept the idea of Nosferatu and the vampire in his head.
Fuck yeah.
And made him want to make this movie.
Understandably so.
Yeah. Apparently, like years later, he met up with someone who was in that patrol or whatever. And the guy was like, "Hey, you remember that weird vampire story?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm making a movie out of it."
That's awesome.
Yeah. He seemed like a pretty interesting guy. And also goes back to the thing that I've talked about before, but that book, The Wasteland, that I've read about how the entire map of 20th century horror starts in World War I.
Yeah.
Highly recommend.
I gotta read that one.
Yeah, I loved it. So after they made the movie, they had a premiere. The name of the film company was Prana Films. It was run by Albin Grau and another guy or two or something. And they had this massively lavish premiere where people were encouraged to show up in costume from the time period, which I can't remember what the name of the time period was, but it's,
old.
Yeah, the costumes and terrible, car wash hairdos and stuff. And they had like a big costume contest, and apparently the premiere was purported to have cost more than the production of the film.
Wow.
Yeah. And so the story after the movie was made.
I was going to say, now, did that lavish premiere happen before or after Bram Stoker's Widow? Well,
we'll get to that in a second. So the story of what happened to Nosferatu, the movie, is that Florence Stoker got wind that this movie had been made illegally. And like the curmudgeon that she is, demanded it be destroyed.
Because she's still alive.
Yeah, she is. She's doing great. She's actually getting Social Security from the American government. But it's not quite she's not quite the villain that story makes her out to be.
Yeah.
Because basically at the time that Dracula was written, and I'm stealing this full from Hypnagogia, so please go listen to that show because it's great. The time that Dracula was written, obviously book royalties weren't really a thing.
Yeah.
Or not as much as they are now. And so when Bram Stoker died, all he really had was his assets, like these books that he had written. And they weren't really pulling in a bunch of back-end stuff. And so when this movie had this lavish premiere, somebody informed his wife about it.
Yeah.
And rightfully, she took legal action.
Yeah. I mean, I would be pissed.
Yeah.
If like my spouse who died, like this was their legacy and someone else was just like, mine now. I'd be bullshit.
Yeah. And so the apocryphal story is that she put this company out of business and demanded everything be destroyed. But Prana Films actually went bankrupt before she sued. And they're not totally sure why. It might have been because they spent too much money on the party.
Premiere, yeah.
But I think there was instances of basically the films going out and them not getting the money back that they were supposed to.
Yeah.
So that had to go into receivership. So the movie was actually owned by a receivership company. So that's who she sued.
Oh.
And amazingly, it was not a cut and dried case. And she had to fight really, really hard to get anything. And originally she was awarded $5,000, I think. Which I can't remember what the exchange is, but the company was like, we're not going to pay that.
Yeah.
And so I think they were trying to basically, we'll keep it in court until she just gives up.
Right.
But she didn't. And so she knew she wasn't going to get the money. And so she changed her demand from money to, then every copy of this film is to be destroyed.
Yeah.
And that they could actually do.
Yeah.
And so, Nosferatu for a very long time was destroyed. All the known prints were destroyed, but, and this is where it gets morally tricky, because thanks to the piracy world that existed, we have Nosferatu today, and Nosferatu managed to become one of the most influential films ever made.
Yeah.
And so it's tough to know where to come down on this, because on the one hand, especially as a creative artist, I don't like the idea of someone just stealing my shit.
Right.
But on the other hand, if they had successfully destroyed this movie, then this movie wouldn't exist.
Right. And everything else that has cascaded down from this movie wouldn't exist.
Yeah. Which I guess the moral of the story is just pay for the goddamn rights.
Right.
Because Universal did like 10 years later.
Right.
And it all worked out for them.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, and everyone ended up happy in that scenario.
Yep. Well, except Bela Lugosi.
Well, I don't think anything was going to make him happy.
Yeah. That's a downer.
He loved it. He loved not being happy.
Yeah, he's probably one of those guys.
Yeah.
Lugosi actually worked with F.W. Murnau once.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he worked in one of his early films.
Cool.
Everything's connected.
Everything.
Yeah. So Nosferatu.
Yes.
How do you think it belongs on the list?
Yeah.
Do you think the placement is good?
I might put it top 10.
I think it's got to be top 10.
Yeah, isn't it like 16 on the
16.
list currently? And
Yeah.
then things like One Cut of the Dead is like number 6 or something. And don't get me wrong, I like One Cut of the Dead a lot, but it should not be beating Nosferatu.
Yeah, we've got our top 10 currently going 1 through 10 is Jaws, Let the Right One In.
Why is that one always so high?
I mean, it's a good movie.
It is, but just like, I don't know anyone else who's seen it.
Jaws?
No, Let the Right One In. Jaws.
Sorry. I thought you were talking about Jaws. I'm like, what are you talking about?
Never met any of our friends.
Yeah, Let the Right One In, Alien, Get Out, Psycho, Silence of the Lambs, One Cut of the Dead is number 7.
Yeah.
Yeah, debatable whether or not that should be on the list at all. King Kong, Aliens, and A Quiet Place is rounded it out at number 10.
Yeah, so yeah.
At the very least, One Cut of the Dead and A Quiet Place out of here.
And I don't even know if I'd call King Kong a horror movie.
Yeah, I mean,
I haven't
it's a monster movie.
Yeah, it is. Okay.
Given the extent of the genres at the time,
Sure.
I would count as a monster
I would
movie.
still put Nosferatu ahead of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think if you are taking into consideration impact as well as quality, I'm like, it's like top 5.
Yeah.
You know, it's tough to watch this movie and not go, oh yeah, this is basically the next 100 years of not just vampire movies, but horror movies in general.
Yeah, this is where it has all come from.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I agree.
Well, we'll have to have a death match between Nosferatu and the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari when we get to that one.
I know my vote.
Yeah. It's over on Patreon. If you want to help support the show, head over to patreon.com/the Penske File, where you can follow along as we are doing remakes and reboots this year.
Yes.
And I'm surprised that I didn't suggest we put the new Nosferatu on that list.
Well, we can always call a mulligan and throw one of the pre-existing ones off.
Let's give it a little bit.
Sure.
Because I was thinking that the new one
might pop up on the list.
Yeah, given the way that this list works, might pop up there, but it hasn't happened yet. But we'll see. Maybe there's one in there that will boot.
Yeah.
But yeah, we actually are. So it's very appropriate that we did this because it has multiple remakes, and
it technically kind of is a reboot.
Yeah, sort of.
Yeah, sort of.
Yeah.
Across mediums.
Yeah. And since our March movie over on Patreon is going to be Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead remake, our next film here on the main feed is going to be George Romero's Dawn of the Dead from 1978, which is number 59.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen it.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
It's always been one of my favorites. Also known as a movie where the middle kind of drags.
Yeah.
But
Second
yeah,
acts are hard.
they really are.
Yeah.
You got to find out stuff for people to do.
Got to reveal some information
Yeah,
somehow.
someone's got to have a story to tell.
Yeah.
That's why bad scripts always have that moment where people just like sit around for a while and go like, I've always wished to meet a people that could be my family. It's like, man, why is that? My family was really tough. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, that's too bad, man. Anyway, so that's what we're going to be doing next time.
Yes.
Dawn of the Dead. Thank you guys for listening. Oh, also, should I talk about this yet? Yeah, screw it. I think we're going to be doing a live show.
Oh, yeah.
Amanda and myself. We're not totally sure what shape it's going to take yet. But whatever we end up doing, I'm going to make sure we get it recorded and so you guys can listen to it. We're kicking around ideas. Recently we were talking about maybe doing Jaws because it's the 50th anniversary. Might do something a little bit more general, like talk about different things in horror movies. I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
But yeah, you guys will hear it when we do. So thank you guys for listening. Thank you, Amanda.
Thanks, Clay.
We'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.